David Berkowitz moves to the country. Yes, yes, yes. Hey everybody, thanks for pressing play. So we're standing here in front of 174 Coligni Avenue in the beautiful city of homes called New Rochelle here in Westchester County. And of course, this is another installment in the apartments of David Berkowitz, and we're here at 174 Coligni to discuss, well, this pivotal time in Berkowitz's life, and also, of course, now that we know about the Wendy Savino Son of Sam shooting, this place becomes even more important in our story, because this house here that we're seeing behind me, an event here very possibly triggered David Berkowitz into shooting Wendy. So this apartment, this apartment in this house, which was sort of a footnote to the Son of Sam story all these years, really has taken on more of an importance. So I wanted to come out here and take a look and tell the story and listen to Nan Cassara and generally have a good time. Now, of course, this is private property. We're not allowed on this property. I do not know the homeowners. So unfortunately, we only can go up to this dividing line here, the public, and this is private, so we'll look here. Well, of course, this is the apartment right here above the garage that Berkowitz moved into, and this would have been the driveway in which he parked. Now, Nan Cassara has a tape with the Queens versus David Berkowitz, People versus David Berkowitz site, where she talks all about him moving in and the experience that the family had with him, which was very brief. Of course, it's a little confusing as to when this guy actually moved in. We're gonna walk just a little bit and talk, and then we'll come back to here. I don't wanna stand out too much in front of this place because sometimes people can call the cops on you if you're just hanging out in front of their house, just filming. But anyway, we can see more of the house here as we pass by. So Nan Cassara only said that he lived here 2 weeks and moved out in a huff over the dogs. And but according to some other sources, he actually moved in February. So it's kind of like an asterisk or like a question mark, like when did this guy actually move in, as we look at the block that he lived on here, and truly the country. Remember, here's 192 Coligni. Remember, this dude never lived in an environment like this ever in his life. He grew up in the South Bronx. Then his family moved to Co-op City, which is about as dystopian as you can get. Then he goes to the Army, where he's living on Army bases in various parts of the world. Then he comes back to the Bronx, and he moves into Barnes Avenue. And of course, Barnes Avenue is where everything really starts for this guy. But you know, I'm wondering, when did this truly start for this guy? Because now that we've extended Son of Sam back to April of 1976, and of course we have the stabbing of Michelle Foreman on December 24th, 1975, it's clear this guy was a violent menace way before we ever thought he was. It's clear that Donna Loria was not his first shooting victim. We don't know that Wendy was. But certainly Donna wasn't, as we look here at the main thoroughfare called Webster Avenue in New Rochelle, which gets you to roads that connect you to the major highways. And of course, the major highway you can get to just down this block, turning right. You can get to the Cross County Parkway, which takes you anywhere you need to go in the city. And of course, we're on the east side now. You know, I'm gonna go around the block. This is kind of a fun area, and we got a lot to talk about, so we'll get back to Coligni. You already saw enough of it. Enough of it. Again, I don't want to stand out in front of those people's houses. So, so then, of course, the question is, like, when did this guy actually start harming people? And we have to radically rethink all of this now. We can no longer say with straight faces that David Berkowitz was the .44 caliber killer. He was the .32 caliber killer. He was the grinning gunman. He was the sniping stalker. He was a domestic terrorist. So the question is, when did it all start? And there's actually some intriguing clues and evidence to other potential crimes that he may have committed, extremely violent, where there were homicides, a homicide, I should say, when Berkowitz was a teenager. And we're fleshing that out now. But we're here in New Rochelle in the country, talking, of course, about David Berkowitz's move to Coligni Avenue and what happened here and what happened after. So we're gonna snake our way back to Coligni. We're on Thomas Place right now. And again, I'm sorry I'm not hanging out in front of the house. But even though I care about you guys as the audience, I ain't about to get the police called on me. So again, people in these areas are very cagey and weird about you standing in front of their place. So we're gonna get quite a bit done before we head back to the apartment. But so Nan Casara, all right, so getting back to Barnes Avenue. So in our last installment, of course, we learned about how he lived on Barnes Avenue over there in the Bronx. And that was where he shot a couple dogs in the alleyway behind, right below his window. And of course, he used a shotgun for that, showing you and again proving to you that Berkowitz indeed used several types of guns to harm living things, whether they were animals or humans. So this guy absolutely goes nuts, moves out of, shoots dogs in Barnes Avenue, and then he moves up to here to New Rochelle. And let's listen to a little bit of Nan Casara talking about him as a tenant before, of course, the infamous incident where he stormed out of the house.
He was an ideal person to have around when he lived with me.
He was quiet.
Very quiet. I never heard a sound out of him until the morning he went berserk over the dog bark.
So we just learned from that little passage that Berkowitz was actually, she considered him very quiet and ideal, an ideal tenant in a way. But Nan definitely noticed a few things off about him. She thought he had psychological problems. She thought that he was, actually she was correct about this, that he was an ex-GI that came back from Vietnam or the war or his army experience, psychologically damaged somehow, which is an apt description of the guy. And of course, the issue in this interview of guns came up. And I think that we want to hear what she had to say because, you know, one of the criticisms that the Savino story is getting is, oh, he only shot people with a .44. Well, first of all, if you believe that at this point, you're just repeating the media-created myths of the spiritually sick Rupert Murdoch. I mean, this was a guy who was basically making up media sensational stories in order to scare the shit out of the public, in order to sell papers. So this guy, Murdoch, and his minions were actually putting the public in much greater damage because Berkowitz, as we now see with Wendy Savino, is a perfect point. He didn't have a type. He just wanted to kill people, preferably women. But remember his his warning to police letter where he mentioned that he was going to kill at least 100 women and men of good health and clean blood. So that was his criteria. And also the number 100 is interesting because that number in and of itself bespeaks of more victims. So we found Wendy. It was a 1 in a million thing. We're in the midst of some research on some other incidents that were very interesting to us. So we'll talk about that at a later date. We're not going to get into it, but we're now back on Coligni Avenue. So you can see this is really the country. So Berkowitz moves up here, right? This dude must be like, oh, finally, I'm going to get peace and quiet. And when he moves in, he's immediately discouraged because, well, he sees that the Casaras own a couple of dogs. Now, I'm going to show you Nan Casara, right? And here's a picture of her, and here's a picture of her with the dogs. Now, do these dogs look intimidating in any way, shape, or form to you? They don't to me. But anyway, these were the dogs that Berkowitz was pissed off about when he moved in, but he moved in regardless. As we walk back up to Coligni Avenue to 174, where we will see the home of David Berkowitz, the apartment of David Berkowitz. So he moves up to the country. He thinks that he's gonna get peace, and he doesn't. Now, peace is only attainable on the in your inner heart. He couldn't get peace not because of the dogs, but because he himself was filled with inner turmoil. So now there's some landscapers in front of in front of 174 Coligni, so it might be a little noisy. But houses here are actually quite impressive. I mean, look at this house next to 174. These things are huge. There's like a guest house back in the back. So Berkowitz moves in here. She thought he was basically an ideal tenant until the incident of him storming out. But there was one interesting anecdote that Nan Cassara talks about in this interview with Herb Leifer from the Queens DA. He asks her if Berkowitz had any guns when he moved in. And of course, this is extremely interesting to me now in light of Wendy because of the whole aspect of the guns that he owned, the arsenal that he owned, and the possibility of him using other guns in other shootings and different calibers and so on and so forth. And of course, now that we know that when he left this place in a huff, and we'll talk about that, he went and shot Wendy the day after he moved out of here. This passage from Wendy is actually quite interesting to me, and let's take a listen to it really quick. And this, of course, is regarding the whole issue of, excuse me, I just have to, I'm so unprofessional here. I'm timing these, so I have my timer. So this is what she said about other guns. Okay, so take a listen.
When he moved in, did you notice whether he had any guns, any rifles, anything of that nature?
No, but my husband said that after he was gone, that a card came in the mail that they were shipping his guns. They were shipping his weapon or something to that order, which led him to believe he had ordered a gun.
So here you have her saying that they get a postcard in the mail saying that your guns are going to be shipped to you. What guns? Where did they find these guns when they inventoried his apartment after the arrest? Everybody's getting so caught up on this. Oh, the guns that he had when he was arrested were the only guns he ever owned. Schmendricks. You need to expand your mind in Son of Sam. You're like the critics of the Savino story. Listen, I get it. You're angry. You're pissed off that we were the ones that broke this story. If you guys had broken the story, you'd all be cheering yourselves. I totally get the human aspect of this, but you can't let this cloud your mind, right? This whole thing about, oh, he couldn't have had a leather jacket. Well, John Comparetto lent him a leather jacket that he never got back. Oh, but now Nat Berkowitz got rid of it. Yeah, so you're believing Berkowitz. By the way, I've come around on Berkowitz and him being a liar. I used to say he lied, but he wasn't a liar. Well, the fact is he was a fucking liar, and he still is to this day. So here's another angle of 174 Coligni, and we can see the apartment that he lived in on the side there. I wish I could get closer, guys, but I just can't. So he lived again in that little annex next to the, right there that I'm pointing to, and he had guns shipped here, okay? Which is kind of interesting. And she said that he moved in with a big chest. Now, a chest, of course, could hold rifles and guns. Not saying that it did, but I'm saying that it could. So this house here is becoming much more pivotal in the Son of Sam story, because did he start Son of Sam out of this house? It was my first thought, of course, that he started Son of Sam at 35 Pine Street, his next address after this, and the location where he was arrested. But now with the Savino revelation, we have to push that back to Son of Sam starting here. And I believe Son of Sam might have started in 1969, as early as 1969. And of course, that's research that we're doing right now in the background. But yeah, this is it. So he gets guns shipped here. He's a very quiet and, according to her, ideal tenant. But a couple days before he moves out, an incident occurs here which is extremely important to the timeline. And let's hear what Nan Cassara had to say about it, because it took place right in this driveway.
I jumped out of bed because there was loud talking, and I thought he had somebody that he was talking to. And then he burst out of the top floor room and went running down the stairs and out into the driveway, which is on the side of the house that he comes in. And he was walking up and down, shaking his fist at the house and raving. Then this is 4 o'clock in the morning.
He was out in the driveway. Your husband went out.
Then he ran back upstairs and he got a can of beer. And he went running down the stairs, and my 19-year-old son at the time came out, and he says, "Hey, what's the matter?" And he says, "Oh, something about the GD, mumbled about the GD dogs again." And he got in his car, and he drove away. And
it was about 4 in the morning, you say?
Yeah, he didn't come back all that day because I was watching for him. And I think it was the next day before he came back. That was Tuesday.
Right.
And he came and went for the rest of the week. And then without talking to us at all, even to say hello, or goodbye, or good morning, he left.
So you just heard Nan talking about how Berkowitz left this place pissed off at the dogs. And of course, he finally moves out on April 8th. Wendy shot on April 9th. Now that perfectly dovetails with my pattern identification of Berkowitz, where he would go crazy about dogs and then immediately in the next couple of days, or even the next day, or even the same day, go out and shoot someone, a dog or a human being. With the most stark example, of course, being the letter that they found in his apartment dated March 8th, 1977, talking about the dogs screaming and how much blood do they want me to spill for him. And then that night, Virginia Boskorichian is laying dead of a single gunshot wound to the face. So he leaves here pissed off about dogs. Now, this is a multi-day process, just showing you the hugeness of this property here. Okay, it wasn't a small house. So he actually had this incident in this driveway several days before he moves out. And if you heard what Nan Cassara said, he was kind of coming and going in the next subsequent days, and she didn't know where he was staying. Now, what's interesting about that, of course, is that one of the few pieces I got from the detectives who interrogated Berkowitz about Savino was a question that I had for them to ask him, which was, where were you, David, between April 8th and April 15th when you moved into Pine Street? And he said he couldn't recall. Now, I don't believe that. I believe that that's pure 100% unadulterated husow. If you leave a place angry like this and so pissed off, and it's a multi-day process, and you don't have any place to stay for a week, and you're about to move into a new house, and you go out and shoot someone, that era of your life is etched into your brain. He knew where he was staying. He just didn't want to tell the cops for whatever reason. So, you know, Berkowitz is a liar. I've come around on that. I've come around on a lot of stuff, actually, and you know what? I'm allowed to. It's called updating your thinking when you get new information. Now, what's also interesting is that Nan Cassara describes Berkowitz, and her description is basically, with the exception of the weight, which is a little off, her description of Berkowitz is the exact description basically the exact description that Savino gave. And we'll listen to that right now.
How tall do you think he was?
Maybe 5 to 9 or 10.
And about how much did he weigh?
Oh, I would say 180, 200 maybe. His hair was dark and curly.
When you say dark, you mean dark brown, or was it in the black?
I would say dark brown.
And curly?
So she said 5'9", about 180 to 200, curly black hair. Two of those three were in the description of the Savino shooter, and of course the Loria shooter, which we know was Berkowitz, and of course now we know Savino was Berkowitz as well. So this place actually might have birthed the spree that we now know as Son of Sam, although I'm not willing to go on record for that. But I am absolutely 100% convinced that when he left this place on April 8th, 1976, that somehow or other in his mania about the dogs barking and driving him out of this place, that Wendy was victimized because of what happened in this place. So I'm pushing the timeline back a little bit with this video to Son of Sam starting here, not on Pine Street. And of course, when he got to Pine Street, it just got ramped up even more to the nuclear level because he thinks that he's going to get peace there, which he should have known better, but because he wasn't capable of peace because he had so much inner turmoil and mental anguish. But he moves to Pine Street, and of course, then he has Rocket, the screaming German Shepherd at 18 Wicker Street. He has Harvey, the Black Lab at 316 Warburton Avenue. He has then King, who replaces Rocket as the German Shepherd at 18. He had Duke, the German Shepherd, at 22 Wicker Street. He had all of these forces in the neighborhood that he said conspiring against him. But when he moved up here to what he thought was the country, he thought he was going to get peace, and he didn't. And Wendy Savino was, as of now, the first person to pay for that as to what happened in this house right here. And what's interesting is that New Rochelle, of course, is just one town over from Pelham, which is where Wendy and her family were living at the time. So he lived very close to them here, which brings up the whole issue of stalking. And I am going to just close out this video, because it doesn't need to be a long one, with the whole notion of rethinking Son of Sam. We now know that the media created myths by the spiritually sick Rupert Murdoch, the Epstein fan. The media myths were just that. They were myths, and they actually put people in a hell of a lot of danger, because everybody was at risk, not just women. Okay? But you can't think of him as a woman hater and as a person who was going out to lovers' lanes. No, again, this guy was a domestic terrorist, sniping shooter who thought of this shooting spree called Son of Sam as his job and his profession. He took it very seriously. He got his weapons, and he talked about me and my guns in his letters to Abramson. He prepared his car very well by getting all sorts of parts and filters, oil filters for it. He learned how to do basic maintenance on his car. He had maps, he had scanners. This guy was going out every night to these streets searching for victims. And I guarantee you that there's probably 100 people walking around today, maybe that's too much, 40 people walking around today who in an alternate timeline, in an alternate universe, we would be naming them as Son of Sam victims. But he just was driving 1 minute too late on the street, and a witness came by, or a car drove by, or a cop car drove by, or some other thing spooked him out. But of course, he didn't have that issue with Wendy, and he was in the throes of mania after leaving this place right here. So, an interesting house that was formerly more of a footnote to anything in the Son of Sam story now becomes a central part of the story. And of course, the people here who lived here were pivotal in capturing him. So anyway, guys, I think that I said what I needed to say. You guys got a feel for this neighborhood, very suburban. Then he moves to Pine Street next, which will be the next installment of our apartment series. But quite frankly, I've been there to death. So all you need to do is look at my last video called Towards a True Understanding of the Son of Sam Crimes, where I actually start the video in 35 Pine Street and I show you the apartment and all that. So that, for now, that's going to have to suffice until I can make up a new dedicated apartment video to 35 Pine Street. But to me, this place was the most important because it escalated everything from Barnes Avenue. Barnes Avenue, he shoots dogs. He comes here, he lives here, he's here for a very short amount of time. He goes absolutely ape shit over the dogs here. And he goes out and then first shoots Wendy Savino. And he goes directly from this house, and the next day he shoots Wendy Savino. So much more important house than we all originally thought, and so that's why I wanted to come out here to see it. And basically, guys, that's all I have to say. I just wanted to come out real quick and do this today, and I hope you enjoyed it. I didn't have much of a script prepared, but I think I got all the points that I wanted to talked about. So hopefully you guys are enjoying where we're at. Things are definitely, I mean, how much further can we go from here? But there's definitely things cooking in the works in Son of Sam land that will come to fruition over the next few months that I'm very excited about. But you guys are just gonna have to stay tuned. And I wanna say thank you for watching, and we will see you at the next installment of The Apartments of David Berkowitz. Thank you very much, everyone.